The Life and Times of Theodore Addison, 5th Grade Challenge, by Jamaal. Sunday. The kids didn't see much of each other over the weekend, except Amber and James the day before. Sunday was church day for some families, and for Veronica's family, that was really important. With her parents being missionaries, they took Sundays like this to travel from church to share their message with the congregants. This Sunday, they would visit a predominantly black church in the northern suburbs. It was a solid 45-minute drive to Miracle Oaks, for which they had to be up early because the church started promptly at 9:30. Why can't they start at 11 like everybody else? She muttered as she dragged herself out of the car into the large auditorium. Her dad was on pins and needles at the thought of delivering a sermon at a 4,000-member church. Though he gave sermons before, they were to crowds of a few hundred at most. Today was a big day for him. He fidgeted with his papers and even dropped a few as he tried to close the car door with his foot. As Miss Teal scrambled to help him, Veronica looked at all the people arriving and became worried that her dad would make a fool of himself. Later in the morning, after the songs were finished and the pastor introduced Mr. Teal, the moment of truth came. Mr. Teal started into his message, talking about his missionary work. Veronica recognized where he was going with it, and he sounded more or less comfortable delivering the same speech, just to a larger crowd. He was on autopilot. She relaxed a bit and sagged into the pew. He would be fine. Mr. Teal said to the congregation, "As we were traveling around the world, ministering in countries run by despots, a family emergency cut short one of our missions and we had to return to Canada. And while we were back home, I heard of some crime that happened in Detroit right across the border. The first thing that flashed through my mind was, glad I'm not there. And that's when God spoke to me. He said, isn't it funny how you'll fly to the other side of the world to help poor people, but you're afraid to help your immediate neighbors?" Afraid? I'm not afraid, I thought. I took pride in going places few people went. Then God said, "Prove it." So I did. I went to visit Detroit and started to head for a church I saw on the street. Then God said, "No churches, people. Anywhere south of 8 Mile Road." As I walked through the neighborhood, I started getting looks as if I was some lost tourist. Some of the teenagers must have thought I was an undercover cop. I could see the suspicion in their faces, and that's where the fear really hit me. Literally, everywhere else on Earth I went, my presence was seen as good news, but not there. All those eyes on me, I wanted to get out of there. And then I realized something. I'm unafraid to go where I feel welcomed, but terrified to go where I'm not, even if it's in the same place. Language and culture didn't matter, and geography didn't matter. It was just a matter of whether I felt safe or not. And so, as I was heading out, God told me again, "Go say hi." I thought, to who? Them? God didn't answer. So I looked around and didn't see anyone but those teenagers, and I thought, please don't send me to get mugged. And then I approached them and said hello. Veronica looked around the congregation at the people's reactions, and sure enough, a lot of them were surprised. What her father did seemed incredibly foolish. A lot could have gone wrong. Nevertheless, they wanted to know where the story was going. Good thing he isn't boring them to sleep, she thought. Her dad continued. I asked them what life was like in their neighborhood. Of course, some of them were looking at me as if I had 3 heads. But eventually they opened up as they explained the things that were good and bad about the neighborhood. And that's when my missionary training took over.
While they were focused on the bad stuff, I asked what they thought was good about the neighborhood. And then I could see a few of their eyes light up. They told me about the resourceful people in the neighborhood, and the block parties they enjoyed in the summers, the budding music scene that Detroit became known for. When I went home later that day, I saw that both they and I were scared. I thought they wanted to do me harm just for walking in the neighborhood. They thought I wanted to get them arrested just because they were black. We were able to connect only once we got past our mutual fear.
So here we are, Veronica said under her breath as her dad began transitioning.
And that's what inspired me to move to the U.S. It would be our opportunity to connect with the people here and build life-changing relationships with them. It starts with love, and perfect love drives out
fear,
the audience responded. Exactly. So what are we afraid of?
Yeah, Veronica. What are you afraid of? She asked herself out of the blue. It was strange to be hit with that question now of all times. She'd listened to her dad's sermon about a dozen times already, but only now did it prompt her to take a look at herself. As she decided to follow her train of thought, Ted's face flashed through her mind, evoking a frown. A debate began within herself, and she had no intention of letting her guard down, even to herself. What do you mean, afraid? And what's the deal of throwing that clown in my face? Her mind said. Well, if you must know, it's 'cause you're afraid to make friends with Ted. 'Cause you're scared you're going to start liking him, flaws and all, her heart said. Oh, what a load. You act like you weren't there when he whisked us off to face life-threatening danger. Her heart replied, yeah, but that was a while ago. You've had time to get over it. Heck, if we're being honest, you aren't even mad about it anymore. You look at it as a moment of heroism. And that giant check didn't hurt either. So what's the point of holding on to that anger? Like I said, it's because you're afraid that if you let your anger go, it'll reset your relationship with him. And if that happens, you'll be crazy about him. Yes or no? No! I know the way you look at him. You study his eyes, his hair, all that stuff, but you're only seeing the outside. I'm trying to get you to see the inside. He makes bad, reckless, dangerous choices. He acts like his decisions don't have consequences, largely because he hasn't been hit with them. Yet. But on the day he does, do you want to be anywhere near him? Be serious. Are some pretty eyes and some curly hair gonna be worth an early death? This is the first time you've acknowledged he's good looking. Progress. Answer my question, Veronica's head demanded. Fine, you're right. But what if he changes? You know, boys mature slower than girls, Veronica's heart bargained. You can't be serious right now. No, I am. See, listen, if we can get an idea if he's really maturing, then there's no reason not to relax this DEFCON 2 to a DEFCON 5, or maybe even just actual friendship. Nice try. And then one thing leads to another, and one day I look up and he's my boyfriend. You really think I'm dumb, don't you? I'm just trying to give you a way forward so you don't have to live your life in fear of what could happen. Just go to him. See what it's like to not want to skin him alive. Talk with him. And I'm not even saying you have to fall for him or anything like that. Just don't be afraid to be his friend if you actually want to be. Is anything I'm saying here making sense? I'm not saying you're wrong in principle, but with him, you're really pushing your luck. I promise I won't say or do anything you aren't comfortable with. We'll just talk and see what's what. Deal?
Fine. Don't make me regret it, Veronica's mind told her heart.
That evening, while Veronica was working up the nerve to go talk to Ted, the Addison family had finished dinner, and Mr. Addison was going over the scouting reports with Ted and Matt. Matthew just wanted to be nosy, and Ted saw no reason to shoo him away.
All right, so that brings us to your final contender, she who must not be named,
Mr. Addison joked. Ted groaned when he saw Veronica's picture.
I can't wait to demolish her tomorrow. It's going to be uncalled for.
Before Ted's dad could respond, though, Ted's watch vibrated with a phone call from Derek and James. Apparently they were both tired of waiting for Ted and needed answers. Ted left for his bedroom to make the call.
Guys, sorry to say, I couldn't determine whether this was a plot or not. I tried Friday to go see Veronica and try to talk with her, but she was not happy to see me, I'll say that. Logic would have dictated that she would have warmed up to me back then, but she didn't. So you're saying what we have might be real?
Derek surmised.
Bookworm ran out of the Archies we were eating at, and we did not study, and I still do not have her phone number,
James said, as if to bring Derek back down to earth.
I hope you are wrong, Ted, but I still cannot be sure. I getcha. I wish I had more answers, but right now I'm flying blind, Ted said as the doorbell rang. Let me get back to you in a few minutes. Someone's here.
Ted rushed downstairs to see who was at the door, but his dad was already opening it. Is Addison... Oh, sorry. Is Ted here? Veronica humbly asked. Ted heard it and was immediately suspicious. She never talked like that. This was definitely a ploy. He took a seat on the sofa, ready to dish out the same harsh words she did a couple of days ago. After Mr. Addison let her in, Miss Addison stepped in from the kitchen to greet her. Hey, Veronica, have you eaten your dinner yet? Oh, we're having leftovers tonight, so I'm okay.
Hey, Veronica,
Matt shouted as he ran to give her a hug. Miss Addison continued. Well, we had Mr. A's specialty tonight. Why don't you try it? Come on back and I'll get you a Tupperware container. Just remember to bring it back afterward. With that, Miss Addison led Veronica back to the kitchen to wrap up some food. It was just the opening Mr. Addison needed to pull his son aside. Ted still sat there with his arms crossed, waiting for Veronica to tell him what she wanted. He anxiously awaited the opportunity to tell her off, just as she did to him. Fed up with Ted's attitude, Mr. Addison said,
Ted, I'm gonna need you to get over this grudge you have against her. It's ugly, and it turns you into a foul person. Dad, it's a trap, Ted replied matter-of-factly. I've known her long enough to know. What if it's not? And you shut off an opportunity to reconcile. Isn't that what you wanted in the first place? Not when it's convenient for her. I just got off the phone with my friends, and all of a sudden the girls they're competing against want to be friends or couples. And now Veronica shows up at the door the night before the competition, acting like she's here to make peace. Would you believe that?
Mr. Addison paused for a moment, realizing his son had a point, but still wishing he could get over his grudge against her.
How about this? He started. Just go and hear her out. Don't show any emotion. Don't reveal your hand. Reserve judgment until you get back home. We'll talk, and you can make your judgment, and then we'll proceed from there. People burn bridges all the time, and then they realize they need to repair them. So if she's trying to repair it, give her that chance. That's all I'm saying. Cool?
Ted threw his head from side to side, then said, "Cool."
Good. Now, go put your shoes on and walk her back home.
When Veronica returned from the kitchen, Ted was waiting at the door, trying his best to keep his poker face from turning into a scowl. The two walked outside wordlessly until they were a few houses away. The spring night felt like a summer night, except without all the bugs. In a friendly voice, Veronica said, "It's warmer than usual."
Just say what you have to say,
Ted replied. "Fine, geez. Look, I was thinking about what happened when you came to my house. And I was trying to figure out why I always have such a bad reaction whenever you're around." Ted listened, hoping the conversation wasn't going where he thought it was going. He told himself,
she better not say she likes me, unless she really thinks I'm stupid.
Looking down at the ground, Veronica said, "The truth is, and I'm kinda embarrassed to say it, but I'm crazy about you." Ted froze in place, and his jaw dropped. He didn't just hear that, did he? Was she joking? Crazy about you. The words echoed in his mind. Veronica still hadn't looked up from the ground, and her cheeks were red. She was actually blushing. It was real. The shock of the admission started to give way to a sense of pride, even though she was, to him, the worst person in the world. But what was he supposed to do now? Was he supposed to say he liked her too, even though he didn't feel that way? Or maybe say he needed time to think? Would time to think even help? Veronica slowly looked up at him as she said, "Sorry to have to tell you this, but you are the most gullible two-face on the face of the earth." Veronica started to laugh uncontrollably, hunching over as she pointed at him. "Come, run away with me, my darling." Her face was fully red. Maybe that blush was her hiding her laughter in for as long as she could. Her from-the-gut laughter filled the neighborhood. Ted was certain his family back home could hear it, and without a doubt, they would ask about it. The only thing that would make this moment more embarrassing was if it was being filmed, which he was almost certain was happening right now. He couldn't help but glance at the bushes to see if Diamond was hiding in them, phone in hand. Almost as bad, neighbors began peeking out of their windows at the two. That said, he wasn't sure whether to feel hurt or relieved. Having his heart toyed with rubbed him the wrong way, but at least he didn't have to deal with the rest of the awkward love talk. After finally calming down, Veronica said, "All right, all kidding aside, I really did want to talk with you about something. Really, the reason I always mess with you is that I admire you."
"What?" Ted replied, underwhelmed.
"What I mean is, like, when we compete against each other, it's like You bring out my best. People like you help me get better and give me something to strive for. But I guess it also means I sometimes get jealous and try to one-up you. And I guess it doesn't help that you're cocky about it, but still. I guess I could put it this way. I love to hate you. You don't love me. You don't hate me. You love to hate me? Ted said. She shrugged, not knowing how else to explain it. Hey, quick question, she continued, trying to hold back another fit of laughter. What would you have said if I wasn't joking with you? Then, in a teasing voice, she said, I can't stop thinking about you. You're all I ever wanted and needed, my little teddy weddy. And continued to laugh. She playfully pinched his cheeks as she mocked him, clearly enjoying playing with his emotions as much as possible. Nevertheless, it made sense to Ted that this was why she was so hostile to him. Each time she pranked him or embarrassed him in some way or one-upped him, it was her way to prove that she was just as capable as him, if not more. He was her benchmark. Why are you telling me this now? He asked as he brushed her hands away from his face. You know tomorrow's the competition. You gotta know I'm not gonna take it easy on you. I expect nothing less, 'cause I'm gonna bring my best. I just told you because, well, if you were willing to come to my house and try to mend fences, I guess you have some good in you after all. So I decided to return the favor. As they arrived at her house, Ted asked, Anything else? Expecting an apology. Yeah. I'm coming for your throat tomorrow. 0 mercy, she said, pointing at her throat. No apology, no admission of guilt for all the things she did wrong to him. This girl infuriated Ted. This must have been part of her plot, he figured. Still, he couldn't tell what her endgame was. Was she trying to make him develop a soft spot for her? Or make him question if she really liked him, thus distracting him? Did she actually tell him she liked him and then change her approach while he was still shell-shocked? This girl is an enigma. Either way, tomorrow was going to be an all-out war, and he needed to be ready. In a friendly voice, she said, By the way, thank your mom for me for the dinner, my little teddy weddy. When she closed the door behind her, she felt a bit of relief. She got to tease him a bit and hadn't started to like him in that way. Respecting him, though, yeah, that was easier and more acceptable. As for Ted, he knew his family would pepper him with questions about what happened. Rather than go inside immediately when he got back home, he leaned against the doorpost outside and replayed the encounter in his head, mapping out everything he noticed. From the way she asked his dad for him to the way she looked at him or averted his gaze. It was about 10 minutes before he realized he just couldn't figure her out. She was either acting or she really liked him and brought it forward at an inconvenient time. Ted's dad opened the door to search for him and was surprised to see him leaning against the doorpost.
Oh, hey, I was wondering where you were.
Ted sighed and said,
Dad, I don't have any real answers right now. All I can do is recount it to you, but I can't say I came to any conclusions up or down. Worse, I don't know whether I should burn the bridge to protect myself and my friends or rebuild it and it's morning in America? Yeah.
Ted and his dad stayed outside to talk for nearly an hour. As he told his dad the details of what transpired, his dad didn't offer much insight on what Veronica's motives were, but he did say that her behavior shouldn't change who he is.
Ted, you're God's son. What did we read today for devotionals? Repeat it back to me.
Ted dryly repeated back Romans 12, verse 2.
Don't be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. You don't want the full verse, do you? That'll be fine. So because you're God's son, you should keep at the forefront of your mind what God would want you to do in every Wait. Let me put it to you as a question. Why is God righteous? I mean, if I was an all-powerful being, treating other people right wouldn't be on my priority list.
That was a head-scratcher Ted never considered before. Normally, when he thought about the nature of God, being all-powerful was the first thing that always came to mind. And yes, being eternal without a beginning or end, and being omnipresent weren't surprising to Ted. Treating others right, though, seemed to be a strange piece of God's character. As soon as he thought about that, he remembered the verse where Jesus said the entire Bible could be summed up in 2 commands. Love God above everything else and love one another as we love ourselves. Yet another verse reminded him to be perfect, as his heavenly Father was perfect. Then another flashed through his mind. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Ted realized that even though he couldn't trust Veronica, he still had to treat her right. If he was honest with himself, he instigated conflicts with her almost as often as she did with him, trying to beat her to the punch. The paint on her chair a few days ago was just the latest example. It clicked for Ted that he was in the wrong more often than he thought. People mistreating him was the main reason he wanted to move in the first place. Now he was doing it to someone else, in a way. Their ability to dole it right back didn't justify his actions, no matter how much he tried to tell himself the opposite.
God is righteous because it's the right way to be, not because he'd get punished for being unrighteous, his dad said, staring up at the night sky. You be the same way, for the same reasons.
Mr. Addison could see the guilt on his son's face, so he added,
I'm not gonna beat you over the head, 'cause I see you get it now. But let me give you a preview of tomorrow's devotional. As much as possible, so much as it depends on you, live at peace with one another. That's Romans 12:18. We'll go over it at breakfast tomorrow. In the meantime, get ready for bed. You'll need your rest.